My name is Spero, and my partner is Robin, who's not in the room at the moment. And we have an organization called Living Soil Network, which it's a nonprofit organization. And our mission really is to educate and teach and talk about the incredible value of living soil, both for our individual cells and for the planet. There's extraordinary benefit and meaning in living soil. It's just profound. It's so profound that it's hard to even talk about it simply. So that's what we do. We restore disturbed soils, and we talk about it, and we demonstrate through actual demonstration plots and through experimentation and things like that. I'm a soil health consultant associated with the Soil Food Web School, Dr. Elaine Ingham's school. So I've gone through that program, and yeah, so that was quite a bit. And also we have a company called Living Soil Company, which is a for-profit. We make biologically complete compost and soil amendments that are used to restore soil ecosystems. We're in South Portland. So we make the stuff that does the work, right? It's the reason we started making that stuff is I couldn't find it anywhere. Nobody's making it. So we decided to do it myself.
Pounds of seaweed per Maine resident per day.
Right, right. We use a little bit of seaweed in our compost, not too much. We actually collect the washed up stuff. That's better for us. So today's talk is soil fungi from persecution to praise, and we're going to focus on saprophytic fungi. So just a little bit before we get into this, the difference. So fungi. So if you're an animal, right? You have, the animal kingdom we have mammals, we have tigers, lions, rabbits, mice, just in mammals. Then there's snakes, amphibians, and reptiles, and insects, and fish, right? This is the animal kingdom. It's huge. Fungi is its own kingdom, right? It's huge. So everybody knows about mushrooms, but mushrooms are just one little part of the fungi kingdom. Most fungi don't have anything to do with mushrooms. They live inside your body, they live on your skin. You have so much fungus living inside you called the mycobiome. It's a new thing, people are just discovering this, right? The world is covered with different types of fungi and molds and all these things all over the place, right? So we're going to focus on soil fungi. We're going to focus on two specific types at the moment. Saprophytic and mycorrhizal. And these are extremely different. They have very different functions. They even look a little different under the microscope. So today, saprophytic fungi, these are the miners of the soil. These are the decomposers. These guys go in and they break down organic matter. They break down sand, silt, and rock particles of the soil. They go in there and they consume it with their enzymes. They break it down into its various components, and then they actually make that stuff available to the plants. So they do incredible amount of work for plants. They grow in compost. We can grow that in compost. There's a tremendous variety of species of saprophytic fungi in super healthy soils that can be up to 25,000 species. So if you just throw some mushroom spawn into your soil, that's not going to do it, guys. You need a diversity of that stuff in your soil, not just one species. Oh, it's going out. Yeah, it's going to go out. So, come on. So what happened now? Yeah. So, okay. So that's the, they have very specific functions. So they will turn on and off their enzymatic action in very minute changes in temperature and moisture in the soil. So they don't just work all the time. That's why you need great diversity of them. They're always turning on and off their actions and how they work in the soil and how they benefit plants. So diversity is the key with these guys. The opposing, the other kind of fungi we're talking about is mycorrhizal fungi. These guys are the transportation system. They bring those nutrients into the roots. This is a whole different thing. They don't decompose. They do not grow in compost. You won't find any mycorrhizal fungi growing in compost. None. Doesn't work. No, they don't. They have to be in relationship with a plant root to live. They only live. A mycorrhizal fungal spore comes alive. It has, I think it's 16 hours to find a plant root, or else it dies. They enter inside the plant roots, or they form on the outside, depending on the type of mycorrhizal fungi. They only live in association with the roots of plants. And not all plants have this association. Most do, some don't. Like kale doesn't. Brassicas do not work with mycorrhizal fungi. This is right. So don't put mycorrhizal fungi in your soil with your kale. It's not going to work. I'll tell you more about that later. So these guys then extend into the soil. They're an extension of the root systems. They bring those nutrients that are broken down by the saprophytic fungi into the plants. Right? So you need both types of fungi in the soil. So people talk about mycorrhizal fungi, yeah, they're great. But unless you have the other guys also, you don't have a complete ecosystem. So what I'm going to talk about today is again and again and again about ecosystem, about holistic thinking, holistic vision, how we understand soil as a whole ecosystem, including the plants, and what that means in terms of how we grow food and grow plants. Because this changes everything. When we have that view and understanding, everything we do has to be looked at with a fresh lens. So, questions. Why do anyone here, everybody grows something? Yeah? Anyone not grow anything right now? You guys are growing, you have a garden or at least a pot or something on your balcony, right? So why do we do this at all? What's our reason? Here's some of the things I thought of, our approaches, our view. Are we into science? So we're trying to do things according to the latest scientific information. Do we plant our things exactly 5 inches apart with a ruler? Do we water them? Do we plant it on the 25th day, 2 weeks exactly before the last frost date? Do we find that date? I mean, are we that kind of grower? Well, that comes a little more intuitive maybe, right? So intuitive. Do we feel, I think it's the right day. I'm going to go out and plant today. I got it. I just got the vibe. Today's the day, right? So we have that. Are we spiritual? Is this, are we really in touch with the cosmos? Are we in touch with the spirit of the plants, of the soil, of the land? Is this, a greater power's edict that we grow? They say, whatever your spirituality is. Is that why we're growing things? Are we economical? Do we want the cheapest way, get that stuff in the ground as cheap as possible, because I don't want to spend any money, right? Because I'm on a budget, right? Cheap. Do we want the biggest plants? Look at the giant tomatoes I grew. Maybe my neighbor's going to see how big my tomatoes are, right? This is a big deal, you laugh at this, but a lot of people, that's what motivates them. Do we want the healthiest food? I'm in this for the health of my food. I don't care about anything else. I'm going to eat the most nutritious food. That's why I grow my own food. And do we want the easiest way? I just get the seeds. I throw it into the ground. If it grows, it grows. I don't have time, right? No, I don't want to weed anything, right? If it grows, great. I grew some great cucumbers last summer. I didn't have to do anything. They just grew, right, because they had a lot of rain. So all these different things are reasons, and I think all of us have some of these things, right? Some more than others. So we're going to wait for this to come back on, hopefully. So a lot of us now, whether we know it or not, if we live in this century, in this world, we are members of the Church of Science. We may think, oh, that's not true, I hate science. Everything we do in our lives is dictated by data, by science. We are programmed to trust science and to believe in science. We'd say, oh, I'm not. No, you are. You get a cold, what do? You get strep throat, you're going to go take antibiotics. I do natural health care. And most of the homeopaths I know, if they get a strep throat, they'll go get antibiotics. Right? So science, we're going to look at science. What does that mean? We have two kinds of science. We have a really good kind of science that seeks to understand how Mother Nature works and helps humans to live in harmony with nature. We understand the natural laws, and we use science and work with science to try to understand what's going on and how we can be more in harmony with nature. The other kind seeks to understand how nature works and then manipulate and really even destroy nature and conquer nature. That's most of what we're doing. And also we have to put in the kind here based on greed, because that's what we're getting mostly now. Science is based on, corruption. And it's very hard to know the difference because of what we hear in the media. How do we know what's good science, what isn't? It's really hard. So I would say, do we work with Mother Nature? Are we working with the natural forces on the planet? Are we working in harmony with nature when we grow things? Or are we trying to conquer nature and dominate and control? This is a big question. I think we all have to ask ourselves this. Because the difference is profound. This is my favorite slide. It all depends on your view and how you see the world and how you approach growing things. Because growing things is a very profound discipline, a way of being, of interacting with the world and with yourself. This view, with these glasses, right? This is working in harmony with nature, the natural world. Everything has fruition. You have abundance. You have joy. You have happiness, all the positive things, right? Wealth, whatever. You have great abundance, health. When we go against nature, this is what happens. We have destruction. We have drought. Nothing grows. Now, why am I even showing this? Because at the present time, 70% of the land mass on Earth is either desert or rapidly becoming a desert. We are doing this to our Earth very rapidly and extensively. And why? Because we have been trying to conquer the natural world. We're trying to dominate it. We're trying to grow things at our will. It doesn't work. We're ending up with total destruction of our planet. So this is not a kind of hippy-dippy thing here. This is serious business, right? Are we going to survive or not? And we're going to survive really by understanding nature and working with nature. So now we're going to talk about the persecution of fungi, because that's supposed to be what we're talking about. So persecution. Do fungi deserve the persecution they've had? Because they've been public enemy number one in the field of agriculture for the last 100 years. Fungi are what destroy plants. We need to kill all the fungus, get rid of it in our soil. Because nobody can tell the difference between beneficial and pathogenic fungi. Because of the way this has to do with petri dishes. Petri dishes only grow pathogenic fungi. That's how scientists examine soil. They put the stuff in a petri dish. Does it grow? 99.99999% of fungi does not grow in a petri dish. So all they saw was the pathogens. The rest of it didn't matter. Okay, this is what happened to everybody's tomatoes last summer, right? Look familiar? Fungal blight. Leaves, fruit trees, that is, I believe, Rhizoctonia, Pythium, Fusarium, these kind of things. These are molds, and these destroy plants. So, persecution. Disease caused by fungal pathogens cause crop losses of up to 100 to 200 billion every year in the agricultural sector. Serious stuff here. So, what's going on here? Why is this happening? The tiniest fraction of soil fungi are pathogens, yet they cause so much damage. The vast majority, 99 point whatever, 99% are beneficial. Why is this tiny fraction causing $100, $200 billion of damage to our agricultural system? Ah, you got the answer. Modern agriculture, modern chemical agriculture, constant ecological disaster, perpetually inviting the wrath of nature. So we're going to go back, circle around again and again and again to this idea of ecosystem health and planetary health. We have to talk a little bit about Ecology 101, right? Diversity is the key to ecosystem stability. Monocropping is not natural, it doesn't happen in nature. Nobody grows acres of corn. Nature never grew acres of corn or fields or forests of coconut palms or something, right? This never happened. So we're trying to do this by controlling everything. And the pathogenic fungi are the protectors. They're like the cops coming in and says, you can't do this, we're going to take you out. That's their role, is to protect diversity and ecosystem stability by stopping monocropping and stopping practices that go against the natural flow of how nature works. And instead, we've started attacking them as the bad guys, get rid of them so we can do more monocropping, more chemicals. So we keep pushing this insane version of agricultural reality on the phenomenal world, which isn't working, everybody. We need to change this. And does that make sense? Everybody understand this? I don't have to harp on it anymore. Okay, good. Yeah, so again, fungal pathogens and diversity. So yeah, when you have great diversity in the ecosystem, no one fungi is going to dominate. No one plant's going to dominate. There's diversity. So when situations change, environmental situations change, then other fungi can come into play and keep those pathogens kind of at bay, right? They don't need to function. So again, diversity wins in all aspects of life. Diversity wins. Always, this is the way to go. So beneficial fungi. So let's talk about what they do now. But before we go there, we have to understand why, how come it went so wrong? Why am I even giving this talk today about beneficial fungi? Why don't we know about this already? How did we miss the importance of fungi, and how did we think that they're all devils in the soil? Why? Why did this happen? This didn't just happen. There's a reason this happened. Again, it goes against the war against nature. That's the fundamental reason, but it's even more particular. So we're going to look at a brief history of fungal ignorance. And a lot of this is from David Montgomery's book. A lot of that you can, if you want documentation, read his book. You'll find some of this stuff in there. Hidden Half of Nature. So there's a number of reasons why this happened. It has to do with the invention of the microscope in 1880s. So we didn't know, we couldn't actually see microbes until later on, whereas soil chemistry had a big head start. So that was the main paradigm that people used, was understanding soil chemistry and not biology. So that's one reason. Again, we talked about the Petri dish. So all these various scientific things. But one of the biggest issue was the corruption of the scientific method of science and then the war machine. What does this mean? How did this happen with agriculture? This is an interesting part of history, and it's very important. So the knowledge of how nature grows plants with microbes was discovered by Western scientists over 100 years ago. Of course, it is known to indigenous people for thousands of years. They knew how to make compost in ancient Assyria and Babylonia. They knew how to make great compost back then. We've lost that ability, by the way, and they use good compost. So indigenous people have known this, that these actually beings in the soil are doing something. when the Tibetans build a monastery, they before they dig the soil, they will do a week-long prayer for all the beings that are killed when they dig that soil. Now, how do they know? They don't know anything about microbes, but they know that soil is full of living organisms. So this guy, Sir Albert Howard, the father of organic agriculture, he was a British guy who was living in India, which England owned at that point, 1890s, 1910. And he started doing, he started observing how the Indians were growing food with compost, right? And he started looking at the compost, and he knew about, he had a microscope, and he knew that stuff was alive in the soil. He didn't know what they did exactly, but he knew that's what was growing plants. He knew when he had that living stuff, living things in the compost, plants would grow. And so he started doing extensive field trials in India and Indonesia. And he showed conclusively that when you grow plants with living compost, living organisms, you have better yields, healthier plants. And he compared it with all the different types of fertilizers you could use. He showed this decisively that it works. What happened to him? How come nobody knows about his work? Right? There's a reason. The guy was ridiculed. You'd think people would go, wow, what happened? Well, there's a reason. Around that time, 1920s, 30s, after World War I, the great powers were starting to gear up again for the next war, right? And at that time, the oil companies, Rockefeller, DuPont, all these guys, chemical companies, were realizing that they could make tons of money selling inorganic fertilizer. Big business, huge. They needed to convince the world's farmers that they needed their product. So what do? They go to the governments of the United States and India and England and say, listen, guys, we have a great thing for our countries. We have this great product. We want you to promote it. The government said, why should we promote this? Because we build fertilizer plants. We can turn those into bomb factories in a month. So when you guys need your bombs, we have the factories ready to go. This is well documented. The government's got behind a massive PR campaign to push organic fertilizers to the farmers of the world. This guy's research, the real science, was squashed. The corrupt science was fed to the public, and everybody followed it and still following it. So one of the, morals of the story is be careful what you read in the press when it's science. So much of what we're told today about agriculture, including organic agriculture, and even to some extent permaculture, is based on this original bad, corrupted, and fraudulent science. Because organic agriculture was short-circuited. This guy, father of organic agriculture, his stuff was ignored. This next wave of organic agriculture came about after the chemical revolution of agriculture, and they basically said, yeah, okay, let's substitute organic fertilizer for inorganic fertilizer. So the modern organic agriculture movement is really based on the chemical agriculture movement, just switching inputs. That's really what it is. It didn't go back to this original guy's understanding of microbes and how they work in soil. NPK, how do you get it? Doesn't matter. You're either going to put in, urea, or you're going to put in compost. So the compost that we all have now is basically plant food. NPK. So the big myths here that came out of this shift. Our soils are depleted of nutrients. Everyone's heard this, right? There's no more nutrients in the soils. Myth number one, big one. Harvesting crops always deplete soils. Huge myth number two. We must replace the nutrients that are removed after harvest. Now, all these are true if you're following the model and the belief system of chemical agriculture. If you have no understanding of soil biology and ecology, this stuff must be true. But if you have that understanding, these are lies. These are not true. And we're going to go exactly into why. Number one truth, all soils on Earth have enough total pool of nutrients to grow any plant you want, as long as you have 3% organic matter. So when you get a chemistry test from University of Maine, and it says your soils are depleted in phosphorus and magnesium, right? You need to add these things to your soil. They are measuring something called the available pool of nutrients in the soil. They are only measuring the minerals and chemicals that are available to your plants for uptake. They do not measure all the minerals in the soil that are not available to your plants because they're in a different form. Like nitrogen, say N2, that's not available to plants. That's bound. The plants cannot access nitrogen directly. It has to be in the form of nitrate or ammonium for the plants to take it in. But there's tons of nitrate in your soil. So they don't even count that stuff because it's not relevant to them if you have a chemical model. So are soils depleted of minerals? No, they're only depleted of plant available minerals. This is a big distinction. But the basic truth is a diverse microbial population will extract those nutrients from the total pool and put it into the plant available pool. This is a big deal, guys. What I just said was a bombshell, right? Remember one thing, remember that. They break it down with enzymes. They go into those rocks, like I said, the saprophytic fungi go into the little tiny sandstone and clay particles. They extract the nutrients, they break them all down, and they turn them into plant available nutrients. This is how, you look at a redwood tree. How is that tree growing? It's enormous. Every year, a ring this big on a 20-foot tree. That's a tremendous amount of energy needed to grow that tree every year. Where does that come from? It doesn't come from the leaf litter or the deer that poops around the tree. That doesn't grow that giant tree. That tree is grown by fungi, especially fungi in the soil that's extracting nutrients from the sand, silt, and clay particles. And then we don't run out of this stuff because the earth is built on rock. And every year those rocks are breaking down and coming up to the surface. We have enough until this planet turns into toast to feed all the plants. So these are like walnuts. If somebody's going to give you a truck full of walnuts on the right, unshelled, or ones that are shelled, a handful, but say you don't have a way to crack these, which one are you going to take? Take the one on the left. You're hungry, right? I can eat. But what the microbes do is they crack the walnuts. So we're going to go through very quickly about photosynthesis. Anyone who doesn't understand photosynthesis, doesn't know how this works? Never heard it before? You guys all heard this before? Yeah? Good. Okay, so we don't need to go through that. What we can do, though, is do this. When the exudates that come from photosynthesis into the roots, 40% of those sugars that get made get pumped into the soil. They get extruded out from the root system into the soil. It's like if you went shopping, spent $100, maybe $500 these days, came back and put 40% of that food, $200 worth, out on the curb for the trash. Why would you do that? Plants don't do that just to get rid of the stuff. They do it for a reason. They take 40% of their food that they create from photosynthesis, the sugars, carbohydrates, they put it in the root system to attract all these guys. They attract the bacteria and the fungi that come massing to the roots. Why do they do that? Because the fungi and the bacteria are breaking down that stuff in the soil, feeding the plants, and the plants feed the organisms. And then what happens further is that these guys, the protozoans, nematodes, microarthropods, they come along and start eating massive numbers of bacteria and fungi and release plant available nutrients, chelated nutrients, right at the root system. And the plants are, wow, this is a banquet, thank you. So this is called nutrient cycling. The organisms in the soil feasting on each other, predator-prey relationships, creating massive amounts of nutrients for the plants to absorb. So this is how these plants grow, trees grow. They don't grow by somebody sneaking out there at night and feeding the redwood trees. Right? Nobody's doing that. Okay. So again, available pool or total pool. Are soils deficient in nutrients or are they deficient in microbes? What's your point of view? Are you trying to control nature or are you going to work with nature? Work with nature, do what they do what nature does naturally, get more microbes, get greater diversity. So just a couple of pictures of saprophytic fungi. These guys grow in the soil and they do their job, do their work. Another thing that they do, see, this whole thing about soil ecology is so complex. And when you talk about ecosystems and how life on Earth evolved, being interdependent, codependent, interdependent on all the different life forms and the great diversity, science will never figure this out, guys. This is beyond the ability of science. It's so complex. And we start to understand one part of it, then we miss the bigger picture. So really, I'm very, I mean, I do soil science and I use it, but I'm very wary about thinking that I know what's going on, or we're going to figure this out with science. It's not possible. But what we do know are a few really incredible things. Like what happens, bacteria and fungi create their own environment so that they can thrive in the soil. And they do that by creating soil structure. Bacteria have incredible glues, and they glue together small particles of soil and form colonies. And within those colonies, they have places for oxygen and water to form, so they can live on these things. These are called microaggregates. They form these little aggregates in the soil. So when you look at soil and you see aggregation of the soil, this is what's happening. And the fungi come along, link these microaggregates with their long fungal hyphae that go for yards and long distances, even miles, with a mycorrhizal fungi can go for miles, thousands of miles actually, and create something called macroaggregates. Macroaggregates, these form something called the soil sponge, which makes soil to be 65% air. Healthy soil is a sponge. That sponge holds water, releases water, has a whole environment for those microbes to thrive in. So when you till the soil, what happens? Destroy that sponge, you destroy that fungal network, you create dirt, compaction. No place for water or oxygen to be held. You get all kinds of problems when you have anaerobic conditions. So this is really, really important stuff. The other thing fungi do, and I'm just giving a few highlights of what fungi do. They create a balance of nitrogen. So again, plants need a balance of different types of nitrogen. They need both nitrate and ammonium, not ammonia, that's going to kill your plants, ammonium kind of nitrate, that kind of nitrogen. So plants need various amounts of these depending on the type of plant. So weeds need mostly nitrate. Old growth forest trees need mostly ammonium, 99% versus 99%. So all along the way, there's a hierarchy of plants that need less nitrate and more ammonium as you get up the scale. So depending on what you want to grow, you want to have a good balance of fungi and bacteria depending on your plant. So if you're growing weeds, you want to have mostly bacteria in your soil because they create nitrate and that's what they like. They don't like ammonium. If you plant weeds in old growth forest, they won't live in there. They will just, you don't see weeds in a forest. Even the forest around here, you don't see weeds growing in there because they can't live in that soil because there's too much fungus. So again, it's what kind of ecosystem do you want? So plants have absolutely amazing immune systems. They're incredibly complex and sophisticated. But in order for those immune systems to function, and when I mean plant immune systems, I mean they can ward off insects by putting certain chemicals out very quickly, and they communicate that to all the other plants in the area, then the whole plants in the area suddenly put out that chemical. So they know how to protect themselves with chemistry, biochemistry, because they're not moving around. They don't have houses to build, and they can't do that stuff with guns, right? So they have to do it with their biochemistry. But unless we give them the tools, unless we give them the fungus in the soil, the bacteria and the protozoans that create the whole ecosystem, they can't develop healthy ecosystems. Same with us. So we look at, a lot of us, this is a fungal fetal nematode. See a little spear on the end? This guy actually eats fungus. So these are some of the other things in the soil. I just want to give you a quick view. These guys eat fungus and they suck the life out of fungus. So is this good? This is really good. We want these in the soil. First of all, they won't show up unless there's fungus. And they release all the nutrients that the fungus has absorbed. When they poop out their food, it goes to the plant roots. The plants are really happy. They get that dead fungus, which is a great fertilizer for them. Now this is another guy. This is a fungus. This is called a nematode trapping fungus. These guys eat nematodes. This is a fungus. These little hoops. The nematode swims in there. These guys inflate instantly like a tire. And they squeeze that nematode until it dies, and they suck its energy. So fungus are not plants, guys. They're not animals either, but they're not just in the soil. They're quite amazing organisms.
Are they visible in the soil?
These guys?
Yeah.
Only with a microscope. You don't see, you don't.
Under microscope.
Yeah, this is all. You can see called rhizomorphs, which are large amounts of fungal hyphae all together. They have oxalic acid crystals around them. It makes them white and reflect the light. So if you long, stringy things in your wood chips or in your soil, that's fungal hyphae. But usually one species. So maybe not 400. Yeah. Is the best. You can 100, you can see some. Where were we here? I lost this. So the question is, how do we take this information about how plants grow in nature and how do we change our soils? How do we actually apply this and make this into something that we can do in our lives? And how can we work with nature? How can we have those glasses that see the full potential of being human and interacting with the world, the natural world, and find our place in the world, what it means to be human in relation to nature? Because growing food, growing plants, to me, is the most simplest and the best and the easiest way for us to connect with being human. And I mean human in relation with nature. And if we can't do that, then there's not a lot of hope for humanity. And that gives us the most kind of wonderful experiences that we can then share with our other humans and other animals on the planet. So how do we do this? So the goal of soil ecosystem restoration needs to be, we can't just focus on fungus. So it's a fungi festival, so I'm afraid that people are going to go away and say, oh, well, we got to get more fungus in our soil. Let's just get some mushroom blocks and throw that in there. This is not going to work, guys. This doesn't work. You might grow some mushrooms, but it's not going to help your plants all that much. We need to get that full ecosystem in there. The best way that I know and what we do is to try to develop that ecosystem outside of the soil and then place it in the soil repeatedly. Like ecologists do when they restore ecosystems, right? They put the animals that are missing back in slowly, not at one time. You have to keep introducing, like when the eagles were almost extinct, they had to keep reintroducing eagles slowly. So we do that with soil microbes. We grow soil microbes in our compost process. We have a very different process. So we create what's called biologically complete compost that has all these organisms in it. And we add that into the soil. The problem with compost now is that the compost industry has evolved out of the waste reduction industry. It's not the compost that the Assyrians were making 3,000 years ago, or even the Indians were making 100 years ago. This is a different compost that came out of the industry that said, how can we reduce waste and do it in a way that's not going to kill anybody? So we're making compost that is made with super high heat over too many times. It's not aerobic compost. It goes through anaerobic phases, which kills the fungus in the compost. So our compost that we're buying that's $80 a yard or whatever, has no fungus in it. I do this. I look into the microscope. That's what I do. I examine compost soils. I'm not finding fungus in this compost. I'm not finding predators in the compost. All I see is bacteria. When you put that in your soil in a 1 yard in a garden, what's going to happen to your soil ecosystem? Any of you know? What do you think?
I think it's going to be out.
It's going to be bacterially dominated soil that is going to attract weeds, because weeds love bacterial soils. So we're going to be creating a weed system over and over and over. Then we have to till that soil, dig it up all the time to get rid of the weeds, which kills more of the fungus every time we till or dig, more bacteria. We're stuck in this vicious cycle of bacterial soils. This is the state of organic agriculture today. Okay? We need to break that cycle. Stop adding massive amounts of bacterial compost to your soils. Right? Now you say, oh, my plants are big and beautiful. Look, that's because they're growing with a lot of nitrate. Nitrate is like nitrogen, grows big green things. Doesn't mean they're healthy plants. You can grow with urea, NPK. You see that corn that's dark green in the summer along the roadside, dark green corn? That's massive amounts of nitrogen being fed to the plants. They're going to look big and healthy and green. So does a bodybuilder on steroids. They look big and healthy till you know how they get those big muscles. So just because you have big, beautiful plants doesn't mean they're healthy. Okay. Robin's 5 minutes till what time?
5 minutes to 10, and you turn that.
At 10:15. Okay, 10:15. I have a little bit more to go. So when we put small amounts of actually what we do, and when somebody calls me and says, I'm an organic grower, I have a lot of weeds, I'm not happy with my soil, I look at the soil, they say they have 11% organic matter, which is a lot. They have tons of plant available nutrients, but they're growing a lot of weeds, and the food doesn't taste all that good, and they're starting to have pests. So I look at the soil, I see no fungus in the soil, lots of bacteria, no predators of the bacteria, but they're growing big plants. So I say, how do we do this? We don't add any more compost to that soil. We extract the microbes from our compost into water, solution of water. We add only the microbes to the soil. Because we don't want to add more organic matter to feed more bacteria. We just want to put the fungus and the bacteria. And we also add concentrations of the soil predators. So we'll concentrate and make the soil predators like the amoebae and the flagellates and higher concentrates, add those so they start eating the bacteria up in higher rates. And then the fungus can start to catch on. And then what happens is the first year, the plants are so used to being fed that they won't feed the fungus. They don't put out the exudates for the fungus to grow because they don't need to do that. They're getting fed. It's like, I'm getting fed with, people just feeding me. Why should I bother to cook for myself, right? So we have to shut off that automatic feeding tube to the plants by adding so much compost, bad compost all the time, kind of starve them down a little bit and put the microbes in so they start to actually work and grow the microbes which feed them. Then the whole ecosystem starts to happen. So, yeah, I'm almost done. Then we have questions. Results of healthy soil, strong plant immunity, superb plant yield, super healthy, nutritious food, less weeding, less work, less watering, more economical. All the things that everybody wanted in that first thing, this is the result when you work with nature. Right? It is simple. So this is just a quick slide from you can go to our website and see this study that we did. It's about 80 pages, but you can look at the pictures. So on the left and the right were rows 1 and 2 that were fed with microbes only. This is South Portland, sandy soil. It's terrible, actually. We put very little amount of compost in beds, just a tiny amount, and we put microbes. The rows 4 and 3, we did nothing to, except grow 3 courses of cover crops the year before. Look at the yields, the difference. That's with putting microbes in the soil. Look at the corn, left and right. Right, 53 ears of corn. I don't know if we got 2 or 3 ears of little corn on the right. And look at the weeds on the right. The left, you'll see some weeds, but they're only in the row. They're not in. That's because fungi suppress weeds. If you have fungi in your soil, your weed pressure is going to drop. Only in the walkway between the rows we didn't weed there. We weeded both sides the same amount of time. And this is the result.
A lot of wood chips.
We use wood chips a lot. So a couple things. Well, I really didn't get to talk what I really wanted to talk about too much because I get stuck in all this scientific stuff. But so science is important to know these things, learn about these things. But equally as important, if not more important, is to have a kind of appreciation and love for the natural world. If anyone hasn't read Stephen Herod Booner's The Lost Language of Plants, I'd highly recommend it. Just amazing. This guy, he just died last year, a year ago, but what an extraordinary person. So he talks about two kinds of being in nature that children get if you grow up in a place where your parents let you roam in the woods, like mine did, luckily, in Vermont growing up. When you're 4 or 5 years old and you're out in nature, you're like tasting all the plants, you're picking up grasshoppers, your eyes are so big, you just love what you're seeing in the natural world. You're in love with nature. It's called biophilia, which is love of nature. And little kids have this, it just develops naturally. But if kids don't have a chance to be out in the natural world, this never happens. But what happens is these kids get this and they go to school and then it's like, structure, right? Learning ABC, learning this, learning the names of all these things. But in indigenous cultures and people who have good fortune of doing differently, that biophilia turns into biognosis, which is a wisdom, an understanding of nature. That's where the plants actually start talking to you, and the wisdom, your inherent wisdom starts to connect with the wisdom of the plants and of nature, and you start to know things. This is why indigenous cultures knew what to do. They knew. They just know. They didn't need science. It's wisdom, the direct wisdom that happens by being in touch with nature. So I say to everybody, people say, what can you do? How can I start this? The first thing you can do is go sit, take your shoes off, go sit in your garden for 5 or 10 minutes a day and do nothing. Don't do anything. Don't meditate. Don't do anything. Just sit there and see what happens. See what you feel. See what happens to your heart, what happens to your mind, what you see. Do this 5 minutes a day, every time before or after you're working in your garden. No agenda. You're not trying to understand anything. Start to connect. And then things start to become apparent, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what your values systems are. Things start to shift. The natural world will work on you and your mind, and you'll have this wonderful sense of communication that starts to happen. So that's number one thing to do. Again, a quote from Masanobu Fukuoka, that wonderful, amazing Japanese permaculturist, who was a scientist to start with. The ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings. So gardening and farming and growing is, to me, the best discipline for you to learn about, for us to learn about what it means to nurture others and receive nurture. So we understand the exchange that happens, that needs to happen with our world and with the natural world, that we're nurtured and we nurture others back and forth. And that is what we all kind of need on this earth, a little bit more of. So finally, a little story. So 2 years ago when we did this project, this is our backyard, South Portland. But 2 years ago we did this project and there was a drought 2 years ago. I mean, it didn't rain for months. One day I'm out in the garden and it's starting raining. The sun's out, it's raining. I said, wow, look at this rain. But it's sun shining everywhere. So we have 1/3 of an acre of our property. It's not a lot. So I walk outside of the front road. There's no rain on Parents. There's no rain on the road. I look over the neighbor's yard. There's no rain in the neighbor's yard. The other neighbors, no rain there. There's no rain in the back. It's raining only on our garden. And not just a few sprinkles, it's raining. Oh my God. This happened 2 times in the summer. So, yeah, it's just a freak, right? You know, whatever, meteorological thing, whatever. So, nature is amazing, it's magical, but it doesn't happen on our timetable. Okay, Robin wants to talk. We're Living Soil Network. Robin gets to talk about what we do, and I don't know. So go ahead.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank everybody for coming and listening. Thank you.
So yeah, Living Soil Network is a nonprofit organization that is who brought this talk to you today. Spero and I are the Living Soil Network, and we work endlessly for no money. If you would please consider getting on our mailing list. You could find out about other talks that we're doing. We are doing an open house at our house. So the pictures that he showed you, we have a demonstration garden in our backyard at our house in South Portland. So we have 2 open houses coming up. We're giving some workshops where you could learn how to do the living soil practices in your little plot of whatever land that you have. We're also have another workshop on June 1st, which is about we want to send a group of people out into the world that can communicate and articulate about how if we bring the ecosystem, that diverse and thriving microbial life back to the soil, how that affects the weather, how that affects the Earth's climate, how that affects all of the critical biological systems of our planet, and how that protects us from climate change, and how each and every one of us can be reversing climate change with our backyard. And so a message of hope, a message of empowerment, a message of how we come together in community and how we support one another. So those are the kinds of things that you will find out about if you get on our mailing list, and I have some sign-up sheets over there. And I would just like to ask you if I could do a promotional, if I could take a photo. And I am trying to get the Portland Cooperative, the Portland Food Co-op, anybody who is a member to vote for the Living Soil Network to become the Register Roundup partners. And so I would love to have a photo to post on social media to remind folks to vote for us. So if you're interested in standing up here and letting me take a photo of everybody, that would make me really, really happy. And
I want to say one thing about, I didn't talk about climate today. We can heal this climate crisis in a very 1 or 2 years when we change our agricultural practices. Soil is the key to the water cycle and the carbon cycle. The microbes in the soil control the water cycle and the carbon cycle on this planet. When we get those things in balance, the planet will cool right away. There's a wonderful film that we're doing a workshop on this, on soil and climate, whole day workshop based on the film Regenerating Earth, Regenerating Life. If you want to find out more about this, watch this film, Regenerating Life by John Feldman. It's absolutely amazing. It goes in great detail about how soil health will cool the planet based on sound science. We didn't get time for questions, so I want to really ask people if there's questions. Please, we've got a few minutes before people are coming.
So I brew compost tea. I use
Right.
bacterial compost.
Right.
Sometimes I put some oat flour in there to see the mycelia grow. But I've also got grain spawn jars now that I never put into substrate. Is that something I could put into my compost tea?
What kind of?
Like a mushroom
Yeah.
grain.
Okay, so mushroom stuff, you're getting one kind of mushroom in there, right?
Some of them have trichoderma.
Trichoderma is not a good thing. Trichoderma is a predatory mushroom. It wipes out other fungi. I don't know why people use trichoderma. It's really scary stuff. It goes inside the other fungi and eats it from the inside. So it's a good way people used to use it traditionally to wipe out fungal pathogens. because it wipes out fungal pathogens, but it also will attack all the other kinds of fungi. Now, there's ways to do it so it dies down, the other stuff grows, but it's tricky business. You don't need it. Compost tea, just to be clear, I would not advise anyone to use compost tea unless you really know what you're doing. Compost tea can brew really nasty stuff really quickly, and unless you have a microscope and you know what you're looking at, it can be really bad. I brew compost tea all the time. I always look at it under a microscope before I apply it. Always.
That leads me to ask, do you recommend a microscope type work if you wanted to get into looking at your own compost? And then how could you get into it as a beginner? Do you have a good...
Well, this is a hard question because it took me a long time to learn how to do this.
Yeah, I can
The
imagine.
best thing is to take a course in it that someone can show you kind of what to look for. I'm trained in a very specific way to understand soil ecology by looking at certain markers. Not to identify bacteria, that's impossible, or even identify fungi as a species, that's impossible with a microscope. But you can tell by morphology what are good ones and what are not so good, and look at the whole thing. So that really requires a certain amount of training.
The Soil Food Web School was
It's the best, really.
Elaine Ingham.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she has the best course on how to do this. There are others, I'm sure. But, yeah.
Do you ever add molasses or dextrose or anything to your compost tea?
No, because molasses grows bacteria, it doesn't grow fungi. So what happens in compost tea, why it's a problem, why it's dangerous, is if you're putting anything in there, or if you have a lot of bacteria tend to grow really fast. When they do that, they use up all the oxygen in the water. That creates an anaerobic environment, even if it's for 5 minutes, which then the fungi all die. Then the bacteria die down, you're still bubbling, so it can get aerobic again. I've looked at compost tea that has a lot of fungus in it. I looked at it half an hour later, the fungus is gone. That's because it was a bacterial bloom, they used up the oxygen, the fungi all died. You can see the bacteria actually eating the dead fungi. The lactobacillus actually eats the fungi, destroying it. You see the skeletons of the fungi, and then they're gone. This is why compost tea is so tricky stuff. Compost extract is not. That's where you just massage your compost into water and put that into your soil. But again, if you're using bacteria compost, all you're doing is add bacteria to your soil. So you gotta either learn how to make compost, which again is difficult, fungal compost, or you can get it from us, or you can take some courses and study how to do it. I wish I could say, here's an easy way to do this at home. There isn't one that we know. We've lost that. We've lost the intuitive art that the indigenous people had, where they say, I put some of this, and this. They know how to do it. We don't know that anymore. Yeah.
Do you feel like it's still better to do something, right? If you're making your own compost and you feel like, okay, I've got a pretty good balance here, it smells good.
It smells
I've
doesn't
noticed
anything.
it smells anything.
Well, that's not true.
Well, if it smells bad,
If
you know
it
it's
smells-
bad.
Right, you know it's anaerobic.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean it's good. If it's you can't tell unless you look at a microscope. Really, at this point.
So what we've progressed to is teaching people how to not get in the way of the microbes, and how to use the soil inoculant that Spero has spent 10 plus years figuring out how to make, using that to its greatest capacity. And that's what we've come to so far. And I just want to say that we only have a couple minutes left before the next people are supposed to present. So I just want to say that back to the climate crisis, that our governments are looking into solutions like spraying sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere so that our planet is covered in clouds. That's one of their ideas for a solution. We have no idea what's going to come from that. And the Biden administration has allocated an incredible amount of money to researching and developing this. So that's just one of the ideas that they have for helping us through the climate situation. So this work here, it could cost just a few $100s a year for you to start bringing your soil back to life. And then you're cleaning your water systems around you. You are healing the earth. So this is the only thing that gives me hope and helps me to feel like I'm empowered and I can work with the earth and heal her. And so anyway, that's my little pledge. I would love for you to get on our mailing list, and I think
And we do some
We need a
exchanges.
picture.
we would love to
Work
have a
exchanges
picture.
sometimes. The minimum thing you can do, if you have like 1,000 square foot garden, you spend $150, $200 a year on compost over 5 years. And leaf mulch at the end of the year, wood chips, start to get carbon food into the soil, fungal food. Slowly build your fungal network. That's the economical way to do it.